All right, welcome back to Niners Nightly. Larry Krueger with you as we talk a little 49er football. And, man, it is my pleasure to welcome our next guest to the KNBR airwaves. Mike Sando has been covering the NFL for a number of years and has done an amazing job. He does some amazing stories throughout the year. We saw him at training camp earlier this week. We thought, hey, let's see if we can get Mike on the show. And here he is on the OA guest line. Mike, thanks for your time.
Glad to be here.
Well, what'd you think? I mean, you had a look at the Niners. It was a brief look. You've been doing this though for a number of years, and you got a lot of background data on the coaches, the players, and everything, the organization. So, what did you think? Your day in Santa Clara, your week in Santa Clara. What did you think of the Niners when you saw them?
Well, I came out for 2 days. I thought the energy was really good. It was fun to get to see them put the pads on. So that was great. I think it's good anytime you're in the this time of the year and you see Trent Williams out there. I mean, he's so critical to what they do. So I definitely noted that. Very difficult to see what's going on at wide receiver. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on there, and maybe some of that will settle its way out. But, there's really not a lot of drama around this team. I think that's the thing that I take away is, hey, Purdy's deal's done. No one's really talking about that anymore. It doesn't seem to be, just stuff hanging over them other than the fact that they had a bad year last year. So I thought it was kind of business as usual. I like to go watch the coaches, how they interact. I think that's fun. Like for me to see Kyle Shanahan as a former wide receiver himself, out there on the details with receivers, showing them different footwork stuff. I love that. I love those little things about practice. Come out to see what does the head coach do? How's he involved? And so that was just one thing I noticed that thought was neat. Kind of reminded me like when you go to, if you go to a Pete Carroll practice, he's going to be doing the DB footwork with guys. So I love that to see a Shanahan engaged at the position that he played really on the details. So those are just some things that me in a couple days that I, took note of.
It's an offense that has a lot of familiar faces, and Brock Purdy signed. But there's questions about the line, and then there's a lot of questions about the defense and special teams, and Robert Saleh and Brant Boyer come over as the two new coordinators. What do you think? I mean, do you look at the Niners? Would you put them in your group of legitimate Super Bowl contenders, or should they be on the outside of that group until they kind of prove what they are as far as the youth?
I think you put in the NFC. I think you put them as a team. Why not? I don't think that. You're certainly going to take the field over them, but I think you could see a scenario whereby it comes together for them. I think they had something like 8 players who left for deals worth at least $10 million a year. Normally you'd say, oh my gosh, the cupboard's bare, but they didn't really. I didn't feel like they, yes, they're banking on some young guys, but they kept a lot of their core guys too. I have felt like the margin for error for them has probably just been slipping a little because some of those guys like Christian McCaffrey, who have an injury history, it get caught up to them last year. And so now you add a year of age to him. Maybe he's going to be fine, but Trent Williams is another year older. I think they do have Kittle, the way he plays. So I think the odds are for them to not make it to the Super Bowl, and I think the odds are probably not to make it to the NFC Championship game. The odds are that probably some of those older guys or injury-prone guys that they're counting on, won't make it through the whole year. So they will probably need some of those young guys, to maybe find a star here or there, right, to help make up for that.
Matt Bowen, guy that I think is fantastic and really knows football, the former Iowa safety, and is on the matchup show with Greg Cosell. He had an interesting article about a week or 10 days ago where he had the 50 best moves of the offseason. And I went through it 1 through 50. There was not one 49er addition. Now, Greenlaw leaving was there, Afonga leaving, Debo leaving, Mooney Ward leaving. I mean, there's a lot of departures that were listed as top moves around the league, but none of the 49ers additions were graded in the top 50 by Bowen. If I said to you, what's the best thing the Niners did in the offseason, is it Robert Saleh? Is it Bryce Huff? Is it Mikael Williams?
Yeah.
I mean, what's the good move of the offseason in your estimation?
I think it probably is Saleh. And sometimes you see this where, like, how much bandwidth of the offensive-minded play-calling head coach has to go to worrying about the defense. And I feel like or special teams for that matter. And I think for Kyle, it's been more than he wanted, recently. So I do think Saleh is a good one. Uh, Huff is an interesting one. I mean, I think that could be a really good one. Certainly, I watched him. In they did the one-on-one pass rush drills, and he had his moments in that. He's quick around the edge, so that could be it. But I do think you're right. The moves that pan out for them, maybe aren't obvious, right? They're maybe not. There wasn't a huge big ticket thing. I think this off season for them was about, even though they're going to end up spending probably more than they've ever spent in their franchise history because they're paying Brock Purdy, it was a little bit of a correction in terms of, hey, we took a step back last year. We're not going to just triple down on some of these guys that didn't work out for us. And so, yeah, it was a off season more of refocusing, I think, and probably a little bit of retrenchment. But I bet you they win more games than they did last year.
Yeah. No, I think Niner fans are hoping. Heck, they only won 6 last year. I kind of think the under the radar move is, and I know a lot of people would maybe scoff at this one, but I want to know what you think of this. I kind of think the under the radar move might be the addition of Mac Jones. I just think Brock Purdy's greatest trait is that he's super competitive. They paid him the contract. He had his down year last year when he really didn't have anybody to compete with. Now he's got a legitimate NFL starting quarterback standing right there. And Mac Jones, I think, has looked good in these 49er mini training camp thus far.
Yeah.
What do you think of the addition of Jones?
I thought Mac looked good yesterday too. So I that's a good one. And let's do this comparison. So one of Kyle Shanahan's, great understudies was Mike McDaniel. Mike McDaniel's done great things with Tua, but when Tua didn't play, they didn't have a backup. They couldn't even get a first down. I mean, it was laughable how bad they were on offense in Miami. So that's probably a good point that, look, that doesn't raise your ceiling, right? Having a good backup quarterback doesn't mean you have a better chance to win the Super Bowl, but it could mean that if the competitive Brock Purdy scrambles around and, hurts his ankle and has to miss 3 weeks, that you win 2 of the 3 games instead of losing all 3 of them, and maybe then you get a home playoff game, right? And that's where that type of a move could help. I do like that. I think we're all also sort of in, even though Purdy's past the point of having to prove he's a good quarterback and all of that, I think we do have curiosity about, like, the fact that Shanahan seems to be able to just plug in these mid guys like Jimmy G, or maybe Brock Purdy was that coming out as the last pick in the draft, and Mac Jones, who was a first-round pick but isn't seen as an overwhelming talent and has fallen on some hard times. Like, I'm kind of curious, like, how good Mac might look in the offense. Wouldn't that be you wouldn't want Purdy to get hurt, but, like, I kind of would like to know what a half season of Mac Jones would look with Kyle, wouldn't you?
Yeah, no, I really would. I kind of feel like, looking back at that 21 draft, that the Niners probably should have just went for Mac Jones and not traded up and just stayed where they were at. I don't think they knew that Mac Jones would fall to them. If they had known that, maybe they would have done that. But this is all 2020 hindsight.
But we now know that Trey Lance was what happened. But I think even on draft day we would have said that the Trey Lance was such a speculative pick.
No, totally. And we're going to see Trey Lance in the Hall of Fame game. What is your thought on Trey Lance? You've been covering this league for a while. I'll just tell you before you answer that my thought is that Trey is really raw and it really needs a lot of time, but I'm not, it's finite. He's going to have a lot of time. He's now in his 3rd stop with the Chargers, but I'm a believer that eventually he's going to figure it out. I just don't think it's
really.
I really do. I just kind of believe. I don't think he's just going to drift away into nothingness. I think he's going to salvage something of his NFL career. Yeah. And I just think he's too talented. He's too smart. He's too dedicated to the whole thing. I just think he's raw, and he's had a terrible, start, of course. But he probably should have stayed in college. He probably should have gotten more tutelage. But I think eventually he might find himself. Or where are you with Trey?
Yeah. See, I think for that type of thing to happen, you need to have an advocate, somebody who really is willing to bet on you and put in the time. And I think nowadays, who's going to do that? I think, he's with the Chargers, Greg Roman, and we know the type of offense Greg Roman has run when he didn't have Justin Herbert as quarterback. So if something were to happen to Herbert, maybe, Greg Roman could fashion an offense that he could succeed in. I just don't see anyone with skins on the wall, or certainly even with no skins on the wall as a coach, coming in and saying, you know what, this is going to be our guy. He's going to get first team reps, right? Look what has to happen now for you to even improve in the league. Like you have to get reps. They don't even practice anymore, you know?
Yeah,
In the off
you're right.
season, there's no practices. And so these quarterbacks, if you're coming in and you have 2.5 years to not get fired as a head coach, right? Anymore, you know, you those that time is precious to you, and you have to declare at a certain time for a type of a quarterback. And I don't really see Trey Lance being anything more than a guy on the roster, which doesn't mean you get the reps. Where's he going to go? He's not going to the World League or somewhere. You know, could he go to some one of these, other leagues and get to play? But he needs to play,
Yeah.
and that's just not going to happen. He's not even going to get number one team reps.
I know. No, it's a great point. I mean, if there is an argument for a minor league system, it's Trey Lance. I mean, he is
Yeah.
absolutely the argument for the minor league system. One more on the Niners before I get a quick thought on the NFC West opponents for the Niners. What do you think of the wide receiver core? There was no Ayuk. Jennings is out right now. He's got a little bit of a calf. Hopefully it's a calf. Hopefully it's not an Achilles. Pearsall got a rest day yesterday. They brought in Demarcus Robinson, who's looked really, really good. Jacob Cowing's down with the hamstring injury. You saw Jordan Watkins make an amazing down the field catch from Purdy yesterday. There's other guys. They have Isaiah Nayer, who's very intriguing. The veteran Russell Gage, Isaiah Hodgins, the former Giant, Junior Bergen, a return man, Malik Knowles, Equinemius St. Brown. I mean, they've got a bunch of bodies in camp. Do the Niners, should they go after a Keenan Allen and Amari Cooper, or do you think they have enough at wide receiver despite some of the injuries and the issues they have going on there?
Yeah, I might go for somebody you can count on. I might do that. You know, I think one of the things I've learned in whatever this is, my 28th year of covering the NFL, is that what happens in camp at wide receivers can be very misleading. You know,
Sure.
there's just you see guys flash, and it's just a different game during the season. It's a different game physically. Certainly, the demands on that position in a Kyle Shanahan offense are different even than some others. So, it's always great when somebody looks good, but I don't think certainly in my 2 days there, and I think just from reading the rest of camp, I don't think there's enough there to read into it. I do like the fact that Kyle has coached the position, and he's going to know what he has. But me looking at it, I think I might want a little more, something a little more established that I could count on.
Couple thoughts on the NFC West before we say goodbye. Seattle, it's year two of Michael McDonald. They got rid of Geno. They're moving on to Sam Darnold. Darnold, I think, learned a lot from Brock Purdy, and he credits Brock Purdy often when he talks about his kind of improvement in Minnesota. I think he learned a lot from Brock's preparation. How do you see Seattle? I see Seattle predictions all over the map. There's people that believe
Yeah.
that Seattle's gonna jump up with Sam Darnold and kind of be a 10-win team, and other people feel like this is going to be a train wreck season for Seattle. What do you see?
I don't see the train wreck component of it because they were a top 10 defense last year very quietly. Pete Carroll's final year in 2023, they were 29th on defense. They went to 8th. And that was really top 5 in the last half of the year. So I think Mike McDonald has figured out the defense. They've got probably a better group of pass rushers than you think. I think that side of the ball is going to keep them in the games. The offense, to me, they've introduced some variance in there because I think Geno Smith, maybe the ceiling is what it is, but I think we know the floor is what it is too. I think he's a solid middle of the pack quarterback. Darnold, I don't think we feel good enough about to know that, but there is that chance that he could be more. So they're gambling that a little bit. And more than anything, I think, you mentioned Mike McDonald in his second year as a coach. I think there were some people they got rid of, like Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, that were names, but they were also Pete Carroll guys. And that's not a bad thing. I think, though, this is a totally different type of team mentality-wise. I think Mike McDonald has brought more of the John Harbaugh vibe to it, a little more business-like, longer practices, a little bit tougher day to day. Whereas Pete was all about building guys up and positivity and probably competitive practices, but maybe not dragging on as long, that sort of a thing. And so I think in changing out some of those guys, it's going to be more of Mike McDonald's team. I do think the offensive scheme is going to be a lot better. They had Ryan Grubb. He'd never coordinated in the league. He was stubbornly clinging to throwing the ball all the time. I think it put hurt their running game, put them in a bind, hurt their offensive line. I think you're going to be a lot more of probably a better running game. I think you're going to see Kenneth Walker do better. I think their line is not going to give up as many sacks. But I still think Sam Darnold, when it comes down to it, some of the third downs, some of the 2-minute situations, I think there's big question marks. I think there's bigger question marks than there were with Geno. So how far are you going to go ultimately? We'll see. I think that has to be proven by Sam Darnold that he can not melt down when it matters like he did last year.
Yeah, and of course the Niners have Clay Kubiak as their OC, and the Seahawks have Clint Kubiak as their OC, and a lot of it's going to depend on their offensive line and how well they can run the ball and if they can have more offensive balance. Quick thought on the Rams. I mean, Stafford's 37. He's dinged up right now, but they do have Devontae Adams. They do have Puka Nacua. They have invested a little bit into their offensive line. They've got some nice weapons, and they're at least, Mike, the first team defense. I love the addition of Poona Ford, but I mean, Braden Fisk, Byron Young, Jared Verse. I mean, they got some really good starters on defense, but they were healthy last year, and I don't know if they can maintain that health. If they can, I think the Rams are going to be a really good team. If they can't, the Rams are pretty thin on D.
Yeah, but I like what they've added on defense. I like the pass rush they've added. I think the Rams are probably the favorite to win the division. It's interesting. We talked about if something happened to Brock Purdy, we'd see Mac Jones. Well, guess who we'd see if something happened to Stafford, right? Jimmy G.
Right, Jimmy G.
So Jimmy G and a McVay offense. So I like where they're at. I think that McVay has been sort of reborn the last couple of years. He had that wavering where I always heard of he's going to TV or whatnot. But
right,
I like the vibe on the Rams. I think they're going to be a frisky team and probably similar to what they were last year.
Yeah, Les Snead is a very underrated executive, I think. And then how about Arizona? I mean, I like Monty Ossenfort and the momentum that Gannon and Ossenfort have. They've spent a lot of their assets in the offseason trying to rebuild the defense. They brought in Dalvin Tomlinson, Calais Campbell, Akeem Davis-Gaither, Josh Sweat. They drafted Walter Nolan, Will Johnson, Denzel Burke, Cody Simon. I mean, there's a lot of new faces on the defensive side of the ball for the Cardinals. What do you think of the Cardinals?
Yeah, they have to be a top half of the league defense this year, or what are we doing, Gannon, right? I think Jonathan Gannon would admit that. They were the first year, this will be his third year. First year, they were 32nd on defense. Last year, they were 23rd, still not very good. I think if I'm them, and I think they used their top 5 picks on defense, and then they spent all that money. You mentioned the defensive guys they got. In addition to Josh Sweat, I think they got Dalvin Tomlinson. They brought back Calais Campbell. He's about my age, but he's still a good leader and a tough player. So they really need to take a step on that side of the ball. They've been better than you think on offense. I think we all focus on Kyler Murray, but their ranking on offense has been okay. I think they just need to help give themselves a chance on defense, and that to me is the whole story of their season. Jonathan Gannon, you're a defensive coach. Mike McDonald came into Seattle. He took Pete Carroll's 29th defense to 8. So Gannon took 32 to 23. He needs to take 23 to 12 this year.
Last one. Every year we see teams kind of, it's probably because of the schedule and injuries and that kind of thing, but we see teams that kind of rise up. We see teams that fall off. It's kind of, I think, maybe one of the secrets to the popularity of the league. You're never quite that far away from returning to the top, and I think that's intriguing to the fans. The team that I like this year, I like the Chargers. I like the fact that they picked up Marion Hampton, Mekhi Becton. I think they're going to run the ball. I think the Chargers and maybe the Falcons. I like Michael Penix quite a bit. Those would be the two teams that I could see kind of jumping forward and making a leap forward. What do you think? Looking around the league, is there a team that you could see making the leap forward this year? What do you think?
Well, I guess I would say Denver, unless we think they already did. I really like the trajectory they're on. They have a really good defense. I think Bo Nix showed us that he's better than people thought. I love the pairing with Sean Payton. They're going to get him weapons. They've gotten him a couple. I think the AFC West to me is the most interesting division because Pete Carroll and Geno Smith have really raised the floor of the Raiders. They're not going to be a 4-win team. Okay, the Raiders are going to win 8-9 games. I could just put them down for it. And Denver, to me, Kansas City is going to come back to the pack a little bit. They won all those one-score games. So Kansas City could easily come back to 11 wins, easy. And so does a team like Denver get 12? I think that's a fascinating division. You mentioned the Chargers, but I like Denver in that division to maybe make a move. And I think the Raiders' floor comes up as much as anybody's floor in the whole league.
Yeah, that's a good call on Denver. I mean, R.J. Harvey, J.K. Dobbins, and then look what they did defensively. Hafanga and Greenlaw are definitely going to help the middle of that defense, but picking up Barron as the nickelback, I think Barron could be kind of like Brian Branch from Detroit. I think he's a great player. And now you have Barron, Riley Moss, and Surtain. I agree with you.
Yeah, so like I feel like Sean Payton in the past sometimes has been a little impulsive, but I feel like they've got a good balance there with him and George Payton. It just feels good to me. It feels like they're making some good moves.
Last one on the way out the door, I said my top 5 moves of the offseason. I loved Laramie Tunsil going to Washington. I love Travis Hunter going to Jacksonville. I love Mekhi Becton and Omarion Hampton going to the Chargers. I like C.J. Gardner-Johnson going to Houston. Really think that's a great pickup. KC drafting Josh Simmons at 32 and Denver drafting Barron at 20. I think were great picks for those two AFC West teams. Is there a move around the league from any team that you're looking at it from afar, Mike, going, man, you know what? That was a spectacular addition.
Well, I mean, to me, no one will add more wins to a team than Geno Smith to the Raiders. He'll add 3 wins easy just because of the power of the position and who they had in the past. So, I think that in combination with Pete Carroll is a great move for the Raiders. They've been a team that, if you look at who their coaches have been, they just haven't had super proven, super competent guys. So I don't know what it's going to get them in the end, how great they're going to be. But to me, they're much more professional operation than they've been in the past, and they're going to win because of it.
Mike, you're the best, man. We love reading you. Did you say 28 years? How long have you been covering the NFL?
Yeah,
18
my
years?
first year covering the league was 1998 was my first year on the NFL, and then
Wow.
I covered 6-7 years of colleges before that. So.
Dude, I love reading your stuff. You're fantastic. Who's gonna be in Super Bowl Sunday at Levi's, or do you make those predictions, or do you not?
Let's circle back with me on it. I haven't thought it through right now, but I certainly will.
Thanks for jumping on KNBR tonight. We appreciate you.
Appreciate it.